I was just about to cast my fishing line into the calm waters of my ranch lake when I heard the sharp crunch of high heels on gravel behind me. I turned around slowly, only to see Karen, the infamous president of the local HOA, storming toward me like she owned the place. Her sunglasses were oversized, her clipboard tucked tightly under her arm, and her expression screamed superiority. "Excuse me," she barked, already halfway through her dramatic entrance. "You can't be here." I raised an eyebrow and replied as calmly as I could, "I believe I can. This lake is on my ranch." She laughed loudly and mockingly like I had just told her a joke. "Oh, that's rich. This lake now belongs to my fiancé. I gifted it to him. It's part of our new wedding venue. You're trespassing, and if you don't leave, I'll call the police." Asterisk, my brain struggled to process her words. Gave it to her fiancé, a wedding venue, on my land. Was this woman delusional, or just dangerously bold? I took a deep breath and said, "Ma'am, with all due respect, this lake has been in my family for 3 generations. It's part of the original deed, well documented and surveyed. You're standing on private property, my property." Karen stepped even closer, her perfume clouding the air. "Not anymore," she said smugly. "We've already made plans. My fiancé is a real estate developer. We're transforming this underused area into something special. You'll see, and if you don't leave right now, I'm calling the sheriff." She pulled out her phone, clearly ready to follow through on her threat. Asterisk, I stood my ground, though my heart was pounding. I wasn't some city slicker who didn't know his rights. I knew this land like the back of my hand. My granddad had fished here, my dad had taught me how to swim here, and now this woman, this stranger with a clipboard and a power complex, was trying to erase all that history with one phone call. "Go ahead," I said, pointing at the welcome sign, still nailed to the dock post, "Welcome to Jennings Ranch, EST, 1954. Call him, but I promise you, this won't end the way you think it will." Asterisk, Karen wasn't listening. She was already on the phone, putting on the full drama performance. "Yes, hello. Yes, I have a man trespassing near the community lake. He's acting aggressive. Please send someone fast." I sighed, pulling out my wallet and fishing license, along with the mini copy of my property map I kept folded in my back pocket. I always carried it for moments like this, not that I ever expected it would come to this level of absurdity. The real problem was that she wasn't confused. No, Karen knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't a mistake. This was a power grab. Asterisk, from what I'd heard, Karen had always been on a mission to turn the HOA into her personal kingdom. She'd fined residents for having the wrong flowers in their gardens. She'd banned porch swings because they looked too rustic, but this trying to claim ownership over land that wasn't even part of the HOA. This was a whole new level of audacity. The worst part, it wasn't just a one-time confrontation. I looked across the lake and noticed something I hadn't seen before: flags staked in the dirt, bright pink ribbons tied to tree branches, and even a small folding table with blueprint papers fluttering in the breeze. They'd already begun planning something, possibly a structure. Maybe a dock expansion, or God forbid, a wedding gazebo. Asterisk, suddenly, it all made sense. Karen had spun a story to her fiancé, claiming the lake was abandoned or public. She probably told him the ranch owner had passed away, or that it was unclaimed rural land. He likely didn't question it because she sounded confident. And confidence, when wrapped in designer sunglasses and fake authority, can convince even the smartest people. I wasn't just dealing with an entitled neighbor, was dealing with someone who had built a full-on fantasy around my property and expected the world to just go along with it. The sirens were faint but growing louder. Sure enough, a county sheriff's SUV rolled up the gravel path and parked just behind my truck. 2 officers stepped out, hands resting lightly on their belts. One of them, Deputy Sanchez, I recognized. He'd been out to my place a few times for cattle issues and knew my face. He walked over and nodded. "Afternoon, Mr. Jennings. What seems to be the problem?" Asterisk, before I could speak, Karen launched into her performance. "Officer, thank God you're here. This man refuses to leave. He's harassing me on what's clearly community property." She waved her hand at the lake like she was unveiling a masterpiece. I didn't even get a word in before Deputy Sanchez turned to her and said, "Ma'am, this lake is on Mr. Jennings' property. Has been for decades. I've fished here myself. His invitation." The shift in Karen's face was instant. From smug confidence to pure disbelief. "No, that can't be." I submitted paperwork. I declared this area common use for HOA events. Sanchez tilted his head, confused, declared, "Ma'am, you can't just declare someone else's land for public use. That's not how property law works." Asterisk, the second officer stepped forward and asked for documents. I handed over my ID and the map copy. Karen, now sweating beneath her perfume, fumbled with her phone, pulling up blurry PDFs and vague emails. It was clear she had nothing, just noise and bluff. "We'll be following up," the deputy said firmly. "Mr. Jennings, you're free to continue your day. And Mammoth, you step on this property again without permission, You could be charged with trespassing. Karen's jaw dropped. But my fiancé already has plans. We're installing lighting and a bandstand. And not anymore, I said, casting my line into the lake with a smile. This lake isn't for rent, especially not to liars. The next morning, I thought maybe just maybe Karen had come to her senses. I figured after the embarrassment of getting corrected by the sheriff right in front of her fiancé, she'd backed off. But no, when I walked out to check the edge of the lake near the tree line, I saw something that made my blood boil. Wooden stakes had been hammered into the ground. A string line ran from one side to the other, and spray-painted markings scarred the grass. Someone had begun preparing for construction on my land. I stormed over, snapping the string line with one sharp tug, and yanked out a few of the stakes. That's when I noticed the fresh tire tracks. A truck or work van had been on my property sometime early in the morning. They didn't even try to hide it. These people were so sure of themselves. They just came right on in and acted like they owned the place. Asterisk, I pulled out my phone and started taking photos of everything. Every stake, every spray-painted line, every disturbed patch of dirt. I had a bad feeling this was about to get much uglier than I expected. Not long after, a silver SUV pulled up. Out stepped Karen, in heels again, this time with a clipboard, and a guy trailing behind her who looked like a contractor. She walked toward me with her usual flair, all confidence and contempt. I told you to stay off this area, she snapped. Construction is beginning this week. You had your warning. I didn't even respond to her first. I turned to the contractor and said, "You're trespassing. This is private land. If you drive one more nail into this ground, I'll have you arrested." The man looked at Karen, clearly confused. Wait, I thought this was HOA property. Karen's eyes widened, but she didn't back down. It is. I filed the paperwork. Don't listen to him. He's trying to interfere with community development. Asterisk, I held up my phone with the photos and said, I have a full deed, GPS coordinates, maps, and the sheriff already verified it yesterday. You're going to want to back out now before you get caught up in something illegal. The contractor's face turned pale. Look, ma'am, I'm going to need to see those documents before we do anything else. I'm not getting sued over a wedding gazebo. Karen hissed under her breath, furious that her plan was unraveling. She turned to me and said with venom, "You're doing this just to spite me. You could have shared the lake. It's not like you use it for anything important." Asterisk, that was it. That sentence told me everything I needed to know. In her mind, because I wasn't throwing parties or hosting events, she believed the lake was wasted. My family's traditions, the peace and quiet, the memories, none of that mattered to her. All that mattered was how it looked in her wedding photos and how it would impress her fiancé's clients. I turned around without saying another word and walked back to my house. I wasn't going to argue anymore. It was time to handle this the right way. I called my attorney and laid out the entire situation. He didn't even hesitate. We're sending a cease and desist today, and I want you to gather every record you can find. Surveys, taxes, maintenance records, anything. Asterisk, by the end of that day, we had a folder so thick it looked like a textbook. And the best part, my grandfather had saved every original boundary map from the 1950s in a locked chest in the barn. We had physical proof dating back decades. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the moonlight reflect off the lake. It was peaceful again, but my mind wasn't. I knew Karen wasn't done. And sure enough, the very next morning, I woke up to more chaos. There were people walking around near the lake again, this time in dress clothes. Turns out, Karen had brought her fiancé, along with some guy in a suit carrying a folder of legal documents. Asterisk, I approached them calmly, phone in hand, recording everything. Karen immediately started talking. "You need to stop this. You're harassing my guests and making this process more difficult than it needs to be." Her fiancé looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot, while the suited man stepped forward and said, "Mr. Jennings, we believe there may be some misunderstanding. Regarding property lines, Miss Karen presented us with certain filings that suggest this. Land was recently annexed into the HOA. I laughed not out of humor, but disbelief. Annexed, you can't annex private property without purchase or agreement. And certainly not with forged filings. Asterisk, I handed over the folder my lawyer had prepared. The man started flipping through it, growing quieter with each page. The maps, the dates, the taxes, all of it, proved the lake was mine. 100%. Karen tried to snatch the folder away from him, but he held onto it and said, "Karen, we need to talk." Privately, her fiancé looked at her with suspicion now, realizing maybe he'd been fed a bunch of lies. She panicked. "Don't listen to him, he's manipulating the situation. He wants to keep this land because he's bitter and jealous," and I stopped her there. "Jealous of what?" "Your wedding plans built on fraud." Asterisk, she glared at me, but there was fear in her eyes now. She knew she'd pushed too far. And now, with legal pressure closing in and witnesses on my side, the fantasy she built was starting to collapse. That evening, my attorney filed the official cease and desist order against Karen and her fiancé. He also contacted the county recorder's office to alert them of potential fraudulent property claims submitted under the HOA's name. The legal wheels were turning. I wasn't just defending my land anymore, I was making sure she faced consequences for every lie, every invasion, every time she used her position to bully people. Asterisks, Karen may have been used to getting her way with homeowners scared of HOA fines, but she wasn't ready for someone who knew the land, wasn't afraid to use it. What she tried to take wasn't just land, it was legacy, and I wasn't about to let her walk away with it. Asterisk. The morning after we filed the cease and desist, I sat at my kitchen table going through an old family album while sipping black coffee. Each photo reminded me why I was fighting so hard. My father, sunburnt and smiling, holding a string of catfish. In front of the lake, my grandfather teaching me how to cast a line. Even a picture of my little sister back in the day, skipping rocks during a summer sunset. That lake wasn't just a piece of land, it was part of our bloodline, a memory bank carved into the soil. That's what Karen could never understand. She thought she could just walk in and assign value based on aesthetics or utility. But some places hold stories deeper than any contract or blueprint. And when you mess with that, you're asking for a storm. My phone buzzed with a message from my lawyer. He'd just received copies of Karen's HOA documents that she had used to claim partial ownership of the land. I drove straight to his office, and what I saw made my jaw clench with disbelief. The documents were clearly Dr. There was a hand-sketched boundary map printed onto official HOA letterhead, and it didn't even match the county's records. One form claimed the HOA had absorbed the land by default due to lack of personal use, which isn't even a real legal clause. She had literally made up a rule. Worse, she forged signatures from 2 board members, one of whom had moved out of state over a year ago and had nothing to do with any of it. It was a house of lies built on fake paper, and now we had the receipts. We immediately turned the information over to the county's legal department and filed a formal complaint for fraud. At the same time, my lawyer drafted a civil suit for $3 million damages to the property, legal fees, emotional distress, and defamation. Because Karen didn't stop at paperwork and construction threats. She'd been going around the community, telling neighbors that I was unhinged, obsessed, and mentally unstable. One of my longtime neighbors even approached me hesitantly at the feed store, asking, "Is everything all right with you in the HOA? Karen said you've been harassing people by the lake." That was the final nail. She wasn't just trying to steal my land, she was trying to ruin my name. Later that week, I met with the HOA board in a formal setting. Most of them looked uncomfortable, especially when I laid out the timeline and evidence. Karen sat in the corner of the room, arms crossed, lips pressed together like she still thought this was beneath her. But when I showed the forged documents, a collective gasp filled the room. One board member stood up and said, "Karen, did you really do this without approval? You faked my name." She didn't answer. Her silence spoke louder than any excuse. They voted her out of the HOA presidency on the spot. She tried to protest, tried to cry, but it was all an act, and everyone knew it. That same evening, her fiancé showed up at my ranch. He looked defeated, a man whose world had crumbled in one humiliating week. He held up his hands and said, "Look, I just want to apologize. I didn't know she was lying. She told me the lake was abandoned land and that you were a recluse who didn't care. I should have checked for myself. I appreciated the apology, but I didn't let my guard down. You still trespassed and brought contractors onto private property." I said, "Intentional or not, that's a serious offense." He nodded. "Solemnly, if I get dragged into the lawsuit, I'll cooperate. I've got texts, emails, whatever your lawyer needs." Texts and emails. That was the golden ticket. If he had digital proof of her lying, especially in writing, it would make our case ironclad. He emailed the conversation thread that same night. Karen had written things like he never uses the lake anyway, and I doubt he even knows how far his land goes. She even sent a PDF titled, "Phase 1 Wedding Plans, Jennings Lake." That was her name on it, her words, her admission. The legal wheels turned fast after that. Within 2 weeks, Karen was officially served the lawsuit. The total amount, $3 million. She'd mocked me, called me a liar, tried to paint me as a threat, and now she was facing financial ruin over her arrogance. Word spread quickly around the neighborhood. The same people who once feared her started coming to me with their own stories. She'd fined a retired veteran for painting his fence without written design approval. She forced a single mom to remove her kid's basketball hoop from the driveway because it wasn't aesthetically aligned. She was a bully hiding behind HOA rules, and she'd finally gone too far. The county launched their own investigation too. Fraud, forgery, and filing false land claims are serious offenses. Her legal team tried to negotiate, offering a public apology and a promise to stay away from the lake, but I declined. This wasn't about revenge. This was about making sure people like her couldn't get away with stealing, lying, and using authority to crush others. If I accepted an apology and let her walk away without consequence, what message would that send to everyone else she hurt? The funny thing is, I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to fish in peace. But sometimes, peace isn't something you sit back and wait for. Sometimes, you have to fight for it. Karen thought her HOA title made her untouchable. She thought her loud voice and fake confidence could bulldoze over the truth. But in the end, it was simple facts, decades-old documents, and a little thing called the law that brought her empire crashing down. And me. I went back to my lake. The signs now say private property, no trespassing, area under surveillance. I built a small dock extension, planted wildflowers around the shore, and installed a motion-activated camera near the trail, because peace isn't just earned, it's protected. The day the lawsuit was made public, Karen's world began to unravel faster than anyone could have imagined. The official court documents listed every detail, the fraudulent paperwork, the illegal construction efforts, the forged signatures, and even screenshots of her texts boasting about claiming the lake as her wedding gift to her fiancé. The headline in the local paper read, HOA president sued for $3 million in land dispute scandal, and her name was plastered all over social media within hours. She went from being the neighborhood's self-appointed queen to the town's biggest disgrace overnight. People who used to fear her suddenly had no problem voicing what they really thought. Some of the same residents she had bullied with HOA violations and fines were now publicly sharing their horror stories. One man posted about how she'd threatened to tow his car because his bumper sticker didn't reflect community values. Another woman said Karen once demanded she remove a bird feeder because it attracted unapproved wildlife. The internet didn't hold back, and by the end of the day, a viral thread titled Karen versus the Rancher had gained thousands of comments, most cheering for me and calling her out for trying to steal land that clearly wasn't hers. Meanwhile, her once proud fiancé disappeared from the scene completely. Sources said he ended the engagement after realizing the wedding venue she promised was a lie and that he could be legally implicated. He released a public statement distancing himself from her and expressed full cooperation with the legal investigation. Karen, for the first time, found herself isolated. The HOA board refused to reinstate her. Her friends vanished. Her credibility was gone. She tried once more to spin the narrative by arranging an interview with a local news channel, hoping to paint herself as misunderstood, claiming she was just trying to improve the community and that the land was in a gray area. But the anchor wasn't buying it. They fact-checked her statements in real time, and every excuse she made was met with hard evidence showing she had fabricated claims. That interview clip went viral, too, and not in the way she hoped. Despite all this, she didn't go down quietly. Her legal team filed a counterclaim, accusing me of harassment and character defamation, claiming I exaggerated the situation to ruin her life. My lawyer laughed and said, "This is desperation. She knows she's losing." We didn't back down. Instead, we pushed forward, submitting more evidence, witness testimonies, digital messages, construction invoices billed to the HOA that had nothing to do with community use. We even discovered that she had quietly approved a budget to install lights and a stage at the lake again, without any resident approval. It was a mess, and every thread we pulled revealed more lies. Then came the mediation hearing. It was surreal, sitting across from Karen, her hair pulled back, her eyes filled with force. Gone was the swagger, the superiority, the smug confidence she once had when she threatened to call the cops on me. Now, she looked like someone trying to hold on to the last scraps of control. My lawyer calmly laid out the timeline, presenting exhibit after exhibit, until the mediator finally looked up and asked her team, "Do you really want to take this to trial?" They requested a private meeting. An hour later, her lawyer returned with a settlement offer, $1.2 million in damages, an official public apology, and a permanent restraining order preventing her from ever stepping foot on my property again. My lawyer looked at me, waiting for my response. I didn't even hesitate. We go to trial. I wasn't interested in hush money or behind closed doors apologies. I wanted everything out in the open. I wanted the full truth documented, not just for me, but for everyone she'd manipulated over the years. If we settled, she could walk away, paint herself as a victim, and quietly rebuild her image. But if we took this to court, it would be on record forever. The trial date was set for 2 months later, and when that day came, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, community members, even ex-HOA residents came to watch. I stood on the witness stand and told my story, not with anger, but with conviction. I spoke about my family, our connection to the land, the betrayal of being treated like a criminal on my own property, and the damage her lies had caused. Karen sat there with her arms crossed, but even she couldn't maintain her cold composure as the jury saw the extent of her schemes. After 4 days of testimony and evidence, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. The verdict, in my favor, Karen was ordered to pay the full $3 million in damages. The judge even added additional court fines and mandated she publicly retract all previous statements made about me in HOA documents and community communications. She was finished legally, financially, and socially. Weeks after the trial, Things started to settle down. Life returned to a peaceful rhythm. The lake was still, the breeze was cool, and for the first time in a long while, there was no tension hanging in the air. The signs around the property were clear now: private property, nutra-specific, I in use. I added a small wooden bench at the water's edge, carved with my grandfather's initials. It was a quiet reminder of what we'd protected. Karen. She reportedly moved out of town. Her house went up for sale, her name scrubbed from HOA records, and nobody really knew where she ended up. Some say she went to live with relatives. Others believe she started over under a different name. I didn't care. Either way, that chapter was closed. What mattered most was that justice was served, not through rage or revenge, but with facts, persistence, and an unwavering refusal to be bullied. And as I sat there one evening, watching the sun dip behind the hills and listening to the soft rustle of leaves, I thought about how close I came to losing something priceless to someone so shameless. But in the end, truth won, and that lake, my family's lake, remains right where it belongs. Not as a venue, not as a fantasy, but as a legacy.